Captain Ethan Hayes stood in the observation deck of the Sovereign, his fingers lightly tapping the window as he watched the shimmering alien ship approach. The vessel was sleek and dark, its surface rippling with energy, a stark contrast to the solid, angular form of the station. The Hadron Collective was known for its technological prowess and medical breakthroughs, and Dr. Nara Velter was one of its brightest stars. As the station's commanding officer, Hayes was supposed to be impartial, professional, but there was a part of him, a human part, that couldn't help but feel pride. The galaxy had seen humanity as little more than a fledgling species, barely scraping by in the vastness of space. But here, on this station, humanity would be tested against the finest minds of the universe. The door to the observation deck slid open with a soft hiss, and Hayes turned to see Dr. Sarah Chen, the station's chief scientist, walking toward him. Her face was set in its usual calm, but Hayes knew she was just as anxious as he was. She had spent years curating the station's research, and now the moment of reckoning was finally here. "Captain," she said, glancing at the alien ship through the observation window, "I've just received confirmation. Velter's ship will dock in 30 minutes. The preparations are complete." Ethan nodded. "Let's make sure everything goes according to plan. This is more than just a scientific exchange. It's a statement." He paused, rubbing his chin. "Humanity is ready to show them what we're made of." "Exactly," Dr. Chen said, her lips curving into a small smile. "Let's just hope we can handle it. The Hadron are not a species that takes failure lightly." Hayes gave her a reassuring smile. "I think we'll surprise them." The ship's docking procedures began, and the station's crew gathered at the airlock to greet their guest. Hayes felt his heart beat a little faster as the door to the airlock opened, revealing Dr. Nara Velter. The Hadron physician stood tall and imposing, her silver skin reflecting the soft lighting of the station. Four eyes, multifaceted and gleaming like polished gemstones, locked onto Hayes's gaze with a level of precision that made him feel momentarily like prey. Her body language was perfect, every movement deliberate, every gesture calculated. "Captain Hayes," she said in a voice that was cool, almost metallic. "Dr. Chen," she added, nodding toward Sarah. "It is an honor to be here. I trust the conditions for my research have been arranged as requested." "We've prepared everything," Dr. Chen replied, offering a warm, professional smile. "We're eager to learn from you, Doctor. Humanity has much to offer." Velter tilted her head slightly, her many eyes narrowing. "We shall see, Dr. Chen. We shall see." As the door to the research wing slid open, Dr. Velter's gaze swept over the human crew, her face unreadable. But Hayes could sense her intrigue. And beneath that professional veneer, he detected something else, a flicker of something he couldn't quite place. Fear, maybe, or was it just curiosity? Humanity had always been underestimated. Today, they'd prove everyone wrong. Dr. Nara Velter moved gracefully through the Sovereign's corridors, her every step silent, her multiple eyes scanning the environment with an efficiency that made the crew feel like they were being analyzed at all times. It wasn't just her physical appearance that was alien. Her entire presence was an enigma. The Hadron Collective had long been the dominant force in medical science, their biological understanding stretching across countless worlds. Yet as they walked the sterile white halls of the Human Research Station, Velter seemed almost, amused. It was the only word Hayes could think of, though it unsettled him. "So this is where your people conduct their studies." Velter's voice echoed slightly in the wide, sterile hallway, her gaze flitting from the walls to the crew members in passing. The Hadron were notorious for their cold precision, but there was a sharpness to Velter's tone, as though she were barely containing her curiosity. She turned to face Hayes, her gaze locking with his for a beat longer than was comfortable. "The level of technology here is surprisingly modest for such an important station." Hayes forced a smile. "Humanity is young, Doctor. We're still catching up, but we've made progress. You'll see soon enough." The doctor's four eyes blinked in unison. Progress, she murmured, as if testing the word on her tongue. Perhaps. We shall see. They arrived at the research bay, a room designed specifically for Velter's scans. The large diagnostic chamber hummed with quiet anticipation. The room was lined with diagnostic equipment, sleek, state-of-the-art technology capable of capturing every tiny detail of human biology. Yet there was something in Velter's demeanor that suggested she was used to far grander, far more intricate setups. This wasn't a judgment, but a statement of fact. She was a scientist, and nothing on the Sovereign would surprise her. Dr. Chen moved forward, offering a gentle nod. We've prepared a few volunteers for the scans. You can start with any of them, Dr. Velter. Velter nodded, her eyes narrowing as she studied the group of volunteers. Hayes noticed that she hadn't looked at the humans with pity or condescension. There was no mockery, only cold calculation. She was assessing their physical worth, considering how their biology would fit into her grand framework of medical knowledge. It was clear she was accustomed to looking at creatures as little more than data points, to be dissected and analyzed. I'll begin with the heart, Velter announced, her voice even. She gestured toward the nearest volunteer, a young man named Jack, who nervously stepped forward. As the scan began, a soft blue light enveloped Jack's torso, and the screen blinked to life, displaying a series of readings in an alien script that Velter effortlessly interpreted. The doctor's eyes flicked between the data and Jack's chest, her brow furrowing ever so slightly. Hayes could see her tense. She had expected a simple, mundane scan, but there was something strange about the readings. The human heart, nothing special in appearance, was showing off a staggering level of complexity. It wasn't just beating. It was thriving, working in a way that made Velter pause. Fascinating, Velter murmured, more to herself than anyone else. This is not what I expected. Dr. Chen watched closely, sensing the shift in energy. What do you mean, Doctor? She asked, her curiosity piqued. Velter didn't respond immediately, her eyes still locked onto the screen. It was as if she was seeing something for the first time, something she hadn't anticipated. Slowly, the alien physician turned her gaze back to the human volunteers, her expression unreadable. You humans, you are far more complex than I anticipated. Her word tongue in the air, an unexpected compliment, but one that carried an undertone of something deeper, something unsettling. Hayes couldn't help but feel a prickling sensation at the back of his neck. What had she really discovered? But before anyone could voice their concerns, Velter's expression hardened, and she stepped back, her hand hovering over the controls. I need to run a more detailed scan, she said. There's more here than meets the eye. The room grew quieter as Dr. Velter adjusted the settings on her scanning equipment. The soft hum of the machinery filled the air, and the volunteers stood still, though their tension was palpable. Jack, still under the scanner's blue glow, wiped a bead of sweat from his forehead. He wasn't sure if it was the strange sensation of being studied by an alien or the fact that he could feel something different, something off, about the way his own body was responding to the scan. Velter, however, was entirely focused on the data pouring across the screen. She had already shifted her posture, her usually stoic expression tightening as she honed in on the human physiology. Her eyes flicked between the readings, making quick adjustments on the control panel with a practiced hand. You were right, Captain, she said suddenly, without taking her eyes off the display. There is something remarkably unique about your species. Hayes exchanged a glance with Dr. Chen, who gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. It wasn't the first time someone had complimented human resilience, but there was something in Velter's tone that suggested it wasn't just human perseverance she was referring to. Velter's four eyes narrowed, her gaze unyielding. Your circulatory system, she muttered. It's unlike anything I've ever encountered. Not in its structure, though it is undeniably efficient, but in its function. I have never seen such a vast degree of adaptability. As the scan continued, the volunteers remained still, though their bodies were beginning to react to the growing intensity of Velter's scrutiny. Something about her presence, Her complete absorption in the data made the air feel charged. Hayes could sense a shift, not just in the doctor's demeanor, but in the room itself. It wasn't fear, exactly, but a quiet recognition that something had been set in motion that none of them fully understood. "We've observed changes before," Dr. Chen said, trying to bridge the gap between the doctor's admiration and the crew's own experience. "Human biology adapts quickly to stress, whether physical, emotional, or environmental. We're incredibly resilient." Velter glanced up briefly, her eyes reflecting the glint of the diagnostic screen. "Resilience is one thing," she said, her voice now taking on a faint trace of wonder. "But what I'm seeing goes beyond resilience. Your system doesn't just recover. It restructures. The human body actively reshapes itself, its cells, tissues, and organs, on a scale I'd never seen before." Her word hung in the air like a challenge. Hayes felt his pulse quicken. There was no doubting Velter's credentials. This was a physician who had studied species from countless star systems, and now she was speaking with awe about human biology. "It's not just about surviving," Velter continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "Your bodies are constantly rewriting their biology. I can see it in real time. It's chaotic, but in an oddly beautiful way." Captain Hayes exchanged a glance with Dr. Chen. This wasn't just about human resilience anymore. What Dr. Velter was describing sounded almost like something unnatural, something beyond evolution's normal parameters. As the scan moved deeper into the body, revealing images of the nervous system, Velter's face grew more focused, her eyes scanning the neural pathways and the complex interactions between the human brain and body. "Your nervous system," she said slowly, "is capable of processing stimuli at an astonishing speed. It's not just about reflexes or responses. It's about efficiency, the ability to adapt instantly to environmental changes. It's unparalleled." The room felt unnervingly quiet now, the only sound the soft beeping of the scanner and the hum of the station's air system. The volunteers were no longer just subjects in an experiment. They were part of something far greater, something that Dr. Velter was beginning to realize was too complex to be understood in the short span of a scan. Dr. Chen asked cautiously, stepping forward. "Is there something wrong?" Velter didn't respond right away. Her hands hovered above the control panel, but her eyes were locked on the data stream, wide with disbelief. Finally, she spoke, her voice low and almost reverent. "No, there's nothing wrong. What I'm seeing, what you are, is beyond anything I've ever imagined. Your biology is a living force. It's a marvel, a dangerous marvel." Captain Hayes felt a chill crawl up his spine. He had always known humanity was capable of extraordinary things. But in that moment, as Velter's voice trailed off, it became clear. Humanity was something far more formidable than anyone had imagined. Dr. Velter stood frozen, her gaze still locked onto the human volunteer under the scanner, as though the data on the screen had become an entirely new puzzle she could not solve. Her hands hovered over the controls, but her mind seemed far away, grappling with the implications of what she was seeing. The soft whir of the machinery and the occasional beep of the diagnostic monitors punctuated the silence in the room. Captain Hayes watched her carefully, a sense of unease growing in the pit of his stomach. There was a growing tension in the air. Something had shifted. Velter, the once confident, renowned alien doctor, was now standing motionless, as if paralyzed by the complexity of what she was encountering. Dr. Chen, sensing the doctor's growing disquiet, took a tentative step forward. "Doctor, is everything all right?" she asked, her voice laced with concern. Velter didn't answer at first. Instead, she reached over to the control panel and made a few rapid adjustments, shifting the scan to a deeper layer of the body's systems. Her fingers moved with mechanical precision, yet her eyes never left the display. It was as though she was trying to pull more out of the data, as if the sheer depth of human biology had been missed in the first scan. "No," Velter finally murmured, her voice quiet, almost to herself. "This isn't possible. It can't be. Dr. Chen's brow furrowed. What's wrong? The doctor's mouth tightened, and for the first time since arriving, there was a hint of uncertainty in her expression. The human body. It's not like anything I've seen before. It's too complex. It's as if your biology is working on multiple levels, constantly adapting, responding, and reprogramming itself in ways that defy known principles of physiology. Captain Hayes' stomach clenched. Are you saying our biology is broken? Velter shook her head, her multiple eyes blinking rapidly as if she were trying to clear away a fog. No, I'm saying it's too efficient, too adaptable. There's no baseline here, no predictability. Your bodies don't follow the typical laws of evolution I've studied for centuries. They're rewriting themselves constantly. Every cell, every organ, every system is in a state of perpetual flux. Dr. Chen stepped closer, her voice cautious. So, what does that mean? Does it make us dangerous? Velter paused for a long moment, as if considering the question more deeply than it deserved. Finally, she spoke, her voice steady but thick with newfound awe. It means you could be anything. Anything you want to be. A body that evolves itself, adapts instantly to new threats, regenerates. It should be impossible. It's unnatural, yet magnificent. Hayes exchanged a look with Dr. Chen. The silence between them grew thick. A strange sensation settled over him, one that mixed both unease and pride. Humanity had always been underestimated, but this was different. They were no longer just a young, struggling species among many. They were something entirely new, something alien even to the galaxy's most advanced civilizations. Doctor, Hayes said, his voice steady but edged with a hint of challenge. Are you saying that we've been right all along? That we're not the weak, fragile creatures the galaxy thinks we are? Veltor turned slowly, her eyes fixing on Hayes, and for the first time, her expression softened. There was something in her gaze, an understanding, perhaps even a recognition, that wasn't there before. Yes, she whispered, her voice heavy with the weight of what she had just uncovered. I was wrong. You are far more than I imagined. As she spoke, the hum of the scanner seemed to grow louder, a stark reminder that the analysis of human biology was far from over. Velter wasn't the only one who felt the full weight of this discovery. For the first time, Hayes realized the true implications of what it meant to be human, something the galaxy had overlooked. Humanity wasn't just surviving, it was thriving, evolving at a pace that no other species could match. And in that moment, the galaxy's perception of humanity was about to change forever. Dr. Velter's mind raced, her fingers still gliding over the scanner's controls with an almost frantic precision. The room was thick with tension. The hum of the diagnostic equipment was a constant buzz in the background, yet it seemed distant, irrelevant, as the alien physician tried to process the deluge of data flooding her consciousness. She had spent decades studying biology, from the simplest bacteria to the most complex multiplanetary organisms, yet nothing had prepared her for what she was witnessing in the human body. Her four eyes darted between the screens, each revealing increasingly baffling details about human anatomy. The human heart, the liver, the lungs, all of them seemed to be in a state of constant flux, constantly adjusting, adapting, as if responding to an unseen force. The cellular regeneration rate was off the charts, far beyond the scope of any known species. The more she looked, the more she realized that the human body was an anomaly, a living system in the truest sense. It wasn't just a machine with parts that worked together. It was something alive in a way that no other species' biology was. Captain, Velter finally spoke, her voice uncharacteristically shaky. I need to analyze the brain. The neural activity is far more complex than I anticipated. Hayes nodded, his stomach tight with the sense that something monumental was unfolding before them. Go ahead, Doctor. We're all watching. Veltor moved the scan to focus on the brain, the largest organ in the human body, and the one that had eluded scientists for millennia. As the scan ran, the readings exploded across the screen. Neural connections were firing at an unprecedented rate, faster than even the most efficient hadron neural networks could process. It wasn't just that the human brain was capable of extraordinary processing speeds, it was rewiring itself at will. Every thought, every action was somehow changing the very structure of the brain in real time. I can't make sense of it. Velter muttered under her breath. She ran another diagnostic, then another, trying to comprehend what was happening. Her breath came faster, and her hands shook as she reviewed the results. The synapses, they're not just firing, they are rearranging. The human brain is altering its own neural pathways spontaneously. Dr. Chen stepped closer, her expression a mix of curiosity and concern. Is that possible? Can a brain really do that? Velter's multifaceted eyes widened in disbelief. Not in any species I've ever studied, and certainly not in the short time span you've had. I've never seen anything that could reprogram itself like this. It's as if your brains are in a constant state of adaptation. Evolution doesn't work like this. It's impossible. For a moment, the doctor fell silent, staring at the data, as if expecting it to change, to make sense in a way that was familiar to her. But it didn't. The more she analyzed, the more she realized that there was no logical framework she could apply. This wasn't the biological pattern of a species evolving over millennia. It was something far more aggressive, a self-improvement mechanism operating on a timescale that simply shouldn't be possible. The human brain wasn't just evolving, it was becoming something else entirely. Something beyond evolution. Hayes watched her closely. He had seen Veltor unflappable in the face of complex medical challenges, but now she looked genuinely unnerved. "Doctor," he said, trying to keep his voice steady, "what does this mean? Are you telling me our biology is broken?" Veltor blinked, taking a moment to collect herself. Her face, usually so composed, was a mask of confusion and awe. "No," she said slowly, her voice barely a whisper. "It's not broken. It's too advanced. The human body is functioning at a level far beyond its apparent capabilities. It's rewriting its own genetic code in response to stimuli, almost in real time." She turned to face the captain, her eyes searching his face. This is not a flaw, Captain. It's an opportunity. But it's also a threat. Your species has the potential to change the very fabric of the galaxy. Her voice trailed off, as if the enormity of what she had just said was still sinking in. No one is prepared for this. The room fell into a tense silence as the weight of Velter's words sank in. The Sovereign had just become the site of a scientific revelation that could alter the course of galactic history. Humanity wasn't just a player on the galactic stage anymore. They were an unknown force, one that could either shape the future or unravel it. Captain Hayes swallowed hard, trying to digest what was unfolding before him. "Then we need to be ready," he said quietly. "We need to prepare ourselves for what's coming next." Velter met his gaze, her face serious. "I don't think you understand, Captain. You can't prepare for this." The weight of Dr. Velter's words hung heavily in the air. Captain Hayes felt his chest tighten, his mind racing. The implications of what she had just revealed were staggering. Humanity, as a species, was no longer just a fledgling civilization struggling to find its place in the galaxy. They had somehow crossed a threshold into something uncharted, something that even the most advanced species could neither predict nor control. Velter's gaze softened slightly as she turned back to the scanner, her fingers tracing the data on the screen, but the intensity was still there. "You don't understand," she said again, quieter this time, her voice almost reverent. "Your biology isn't just evolving. It's accelerating at an exponential rate. You've gone beyond natural selection. Your bodies have unlocked a potential that could allow you to reshape reality itself. Your nervous system, your immune system, every part of you is designed to adapt, to evolve, to improve faster than any other species I've ever encountered." Dr. Chen's brow furrowed. "That sounds dangerous. If we're constantly evolving, can we even control it? What if our biology changes in ways we can't predict? Velter's expression grew more serious. That's exactly what I'm trying to say. You're not just evolving in response to the environment. You're actively directing your own evolution. It's as though your bodies have reached a tipping point where they can shape their own genetic future. But this comes with a cost. The room seemed to shrink around them as the alien doctor's words sank in. Hayes could feel a chill creeping up his spine. He had always believed humanity's greatest asset was its ingenuity, its adaptability. But this was something else entirely. The ability to rewrite your genetic code in real time. The potential for limitless growth. Cost, Hayes repeated, his voice a little tighter than he intended. Velter hesitated before answering, her many eyes flicking toward the display once more. The cost is stability. Biological systems are meant to be balanced, predictable. Your bodies have crossed a line where that balance no longer exists. You're capable of extraordinary feats, resilience, regeneration, adaptation. But the process is unstable. The rate of change is accelerating. It could spiral out of control. Hayes clenched his fists. He had fought for humanity's place in the stars for years, but now, standing on the precipice of a new understanding of human potential, it felt less like a victory and more like a terrifying unknown. Are you telling me we could implode? That we might lose ourselves in the process? Velter met his gaze, her expression unyielding. I don't know, but you could. The line between greatness and catastrophe is razor thin. Humanity could evolve into something beyond all known species, but there's no guarantee it will be you who survives the process. Dr. Chen spoke up, her voice thoughtful. So what do we do? If we're capable of this kind of evolution, this kind of potential, surely there's a way to harness it. Velter didn't immediately respond. She stared at the data as if hoping for some solution to appear on the screen. Perhaps, she said at last. But that requires more than just medical knowledge. It requires a deep understanding of your species, of what drives you, what holds you together, and what could tear you apart. Hayes turned to face her, his expression resolute. Then help us understand it. We don't have the luxury of time, Doctor. We need to know what this means for us, for the future of humanity. Velter's gaze softened for a moment, and she nodded slowly. I will help you. But know this, Captain. What we uncover could change everything. The galaxy may never look at humanity the same way again. As she spoke, Hayes felt a strange sense of both dread and awe. He had always known that humanity was capable of greatness. But this was something no one could have predicted. Humanity wasn't just a part of the galaxy anymore. It was about to become its most powerful force. And whether that power would be their salvation or their destruction was something that no one, not even Dr. Velter, could say. But one thing was certain. Humanity was no longer just another species in the cosmic dance. They were about to redefine their place in the stars. The room was thick with uncertainty, the silence pressing down on them, as the crew of the Sovereign grappled with the enormity of Velter's revelation. Captain Hayes felt like he was standing at the edge of a precipice, staring into an abyss that could swallow them whole, or propel them to heights no one could fathom. Dr. Velter, still scanning the data, looked more unsettled than Hayes had ever seen her. The confidence that had marked her arrival seemed to have evaporated in the face of this discovery, replaced by a quiet wariness. We're on the brink of something, Velter said finally, her voice steady, though her eyes still flicked nervously to the screens. Humanity isn't just evolving at an unprecedented rate. You're on the verge of becoming something else, something far beyond the scope of biology as we know it. But if that potential is to be realized, you'll have to face the consequences of what comes next. The risk of failure is immeasurable. Hayes took a step forward, his mind still reeling from her words. Consequences? You mean the instability you're talking about? What happens if we can't control it? Velter's expression hardened. If you lose control, if your evolution accelerates beyond the point of self-regulation, you could transform into a being unrecognizable to the galaxy. Your biology would become a wild, untethered force. You would no longer be human. You would be something, alien to everything you've known. Dr. Chen, who had been quietly listening, spoke up. So the risk is that we become something monstrous. Velter's eyes softened slightly, but the warning in her voice didn't diminish. Not monstrous, but unpredictable. Your minds, your emotions, your very identity could fracture as your bodies evolve. A species that can adapt so rapidly might lose the very core of what makes it human. And if that happens, you risk losing everything you've built, every relationship, every connection you've made. There's a possibility that the human experience, the very essence of your species, could disappear in the blink of an eye. The words landed like a punch, and Hayes felt the weight of them deep in his gut. He had always known the dangers of exploration, of pushing the boundaries of what humanity was capable of. But this was something entirely different. They weren't just facing an external enemy or a galactic war. They were fighting themselves, battling an unknown force that lived inside their very DNA. He met Velter's gaze, his voice quiet but resolute. So, what do we do now? How do we control this? Can it be done? Velter hesitated. The only way to prevent total chaos is to slow it down. You'll need to find a way to regulate the process of evolution, to set boundaries on what your biology can do. You'll need to control the very force that is driving you. The question is, can your species accept control? Can you stop evolving when it's in your nature to keep pushing forward? Hayes swallowed hard, staring at the screens, the swirling data that showed humanity's potential and its peril. We've always been told that progress is the key to survival, he said quietly. But what if that progress is what destroys us? Velter turned away from the scanner and faced him fully, her multifaceted eyes intense. Progress is not always linear, Captain. It can be a spiral. You've reached a threshold, a point of no return. The question is whether humanity can navigate it, or whether it will be consumed by its own ambitions. The weight of her words settled over him like a shroud. Humanity was standing at a crossroads, its future uncertain. They could embrace their evolution and risk becoming something unrecognizable, or they could hold back, trying to rein in the force that had already been unleashed within them. Either path led into uncharted territory, and no one, least of all Velter, could predict where it would end. Whatever happens next, Hayes said, his voice steady despite the storm inside, we face it together. The galaxy has underestimated us for too long. Maybe it's time we show them what we can really become. Velter studied him for a long moment, then nodded. You are bold, Captain, but boldness alone may not be enough. You'll need more than courage to control this power. We'll find a way, Hayes replied, his voice unwavering. We have to. The doctor didn't respond immediately, but her eyes softened ever so slightly. For the first time, Hayes saw a hint of respect in her gaze, but there was no denying the danger that lay ahead. Humanity's future was hanging by a thread, and only time would tell if they could hold on. The silence in the room stretched long, each second heavy with the weight of the decision that loomed over them. Captain Hayes could feel the burden settle on his shoulders like an invisible cloak. This wasn't just about leading his crew anymore. It was about leading humanity into a future that was as unpredictable as it was terrifying. Velter stood with her back to the scanner now, her posture rigid, as if she too were caught between awe and dread at the revelation she had uncovered. She was a brilliant scientist, a pioneer in her own right, but now, faced with the boundless potential of humanity, she seemed almost small, a mere witness to a force that could unravel or elevate everything she had known. Hayes spoke first, his voice cutting through the tension. We've been told for centuries that we were just another species, struggling to find our place in the cosmos. But if what you're saying is true, we're not just fighting for survival anymore. We're fighting for control over our future. Velter nodded, her multi-eyed gaze scanning the room, her mind clearly still racing through the implications. Exactly. Your species can no longer be regarded as simply another young civilization. The human body is not just a vessel. It's a living algorithm that can adapt, evolve, and rewrite itself at will. That's power. It could be a gift or a curse. But power, regardless of its nature, must be understood, tempered, and directed. Otherwise, it will destroy you. Dr. Chen stepped forward, her face etched with resolve. Then we understand it. We have to. We can't afford to let this spiral out of control. We've spent our entire existence advancing, improving, trying to become more than we were. Now, we can't back down. We need to find a way to guide this evolution. Hayes turned to her, his face firm. Exactly. The galaxy doesn't understand what humanity is capable of. They see us as a fringe species, fragile and vulnerable. But we're not. We've adapted to every challenge thrown at us. And this will be no different. He turned back to Velter. Doctor, we need your help to ensure that this evolution doesn't consume us. We need to find a way to harness it, to understand its limits, so we can control it. Velter's expression softened, her sternness momentarily giving way to something more human, a flicker of understanding. Perhaps even a grudging respect. You're right, she said, her voice steady but full of gravity. I cannot predict the future, Captain, but I can help you chart a course through this uncertainty. We will need to study the human genome in ways we've never dared before. We'll need to look at the evolution of every cell, every tissue, every neural pathway. And most importantly, we'll need to understand your psychological and emotional frameworks. Because this power doesn't just reside in the body. It's tied to your minds, to your souls. And without understanding that, you could easily lose yourselves. Hayes felt a chill run through him, but he stood tall. Then that's our mission. We have no choice but to pursue it. The room fell into a thoughtful silence. Hayes knew that the road ahead would not be easy. The risks were immense, and the consequences of failure unimaginable. But for the first time, he felt a sense of purpose that transcended the typical concerns of a captain or a leader. He wasn't just guiding his crew anymore. He was guiding humanity into a new era, one that would either mark the dawn of an unprecedented age or the fall of everything they had worked so hard to build. But even in the face of such uncertainty, Hayes knew one thing for certain. Humanity had always faced the unknown, and each time they had come out stronger. And this time, he would make sure they did too. "We're ready," Hayes said firmly, his voice resonating with a confidence that had been hard-earned. "Let's begin." And as the crew of the Sovereign braced themselves for the unknown, they stepped forward together, knowing that the future was no longer something they would simply survive. It was something they would shape.